There is a truth that two men discovered. Two men who never met, who lived on different continents, who spoke different languages, breathed different airs, ate different foods, prayed or did not pray, to completely different things. One was born at the foot of the Himalayas, in a palace surrounded by fragrant gardens and silent maidens. The other was born in an alley in Amsterdam, the son of Jewish merchants fleeing the Inquisition, surrounded by tallow candles and the smell of old spices. One was a prince, the other was the son of immigrants. One abandoned a throne. The other was expelled from his community with a curse so brutal that even today researchers shudder when they read it aloud. One found his truth beneath a fig tree on a full moon night, after nearly starving to death. The other found his among hand-polished glass lenses, in a city where winter lasts too long and where death arrived too soon to take him. And yet, even with all of this separating them, both arrived at the same place, to the same conclusion, to the same truth, and this truth is not comfortable. It will not give you immediate peace. It is not the kind of thing you read, smile, and go to sleep peacefully. No, this truth is the kind of thing that, once you see it, you can never unsee it. It's like those optical illusions where suddenly you see the face in the tree. And then, no matter how many times you look, the face is always there. You cannot go back. There is no going back. Throughout this story, which is not a summary, not a lecture, not a self-help manual disguised as philosophy, you will walk side by side with Siddhartha Gautama on the dusty streets of Kapilavastu. You will smell the burnt wax in Spinoza's studio in Regensburg. You will be present at the exact moment when each of these men saw what no one should see before being ready. But here's an honest warning. Many people come to the end of this journey different from how they began. Not necessarily happier, more lucid. And there is a huge difference between the two. Happiness is what you feel when the world confirms what you want to believe. Lucidity is what happens when you stop needing that confirmation. Buddha called it awakening. Spinoza called it freedom through understanding. They were both talking about the same thing, and they were both at the same time warning this freedom has a price. The price is illusion. Not the illusion that things are bad, not the illusion that you are suffering. The most expensive illusion of all, the illusion that there is a you separate from the rest of the universe, looking at everything from the outside, judging, desiring, fearing. The illusion of the self. They both said this in different ways, with different vocabularies, with different instruments. One used silence as a tool, the other used geometry. But the target was the same. And when you understand what they were pointing to, really understand, not just repeat the pretty words, something changes in you in a way that cannot be fixed. It can be terrifying. It can be liberating. It is probably both at the same time. This is the story of two men who reached the edge of the same abyss, looked down, and instead of retreating, smiled. We begin now. There was a city where gold was used to pave the edges of windows, not because gold was necessary, not because it protected against the cold or the rain, but because wealth, when it reaches a certain level, needs to show itself. It needs to shout. It needs to convince not only others but itself that it exists. Kapilavastu was that city. Located in what we now call southern Nepal, surrounded by mountains that in winter became so white they seemed to have been painted by someone who never knew how to use any color other than absolute white. Kapilavastu was the capital of the Shakya clan, a warrior people, proud, whose men learned to ride before they learned to walk, and whose women carried in their eyes the hardness of those who know that peace is just the pause between two wars. And at the center of this city, in the tallest palace, in the most protected room, in a cradle made of wood perfumed with sandalwood and jasmine, a child was born whom the whole world still does not quite know how to classify. He was not a god. He himself said so. He was not a prophet. He did not receive messages from any higher being. He was a man who decided one day to stop accepting ready-made answers. The name his parents gave him was Siddhartha. In Sanskrit, the word means something close to one who has attained his goal, which is a remarkable irony because at the moment of birth, no goal had yet been achieved. It was like naming a child victorious before he even knew how to walk. His father was Suddhodana, the king of the Shakyas, And Suddhodana was the kind of man who believed that love could be exercised through control. He loved his son in the only way he knew, by protecting him from everything that could make him suffer, from everything that could make him question. Before Siddhartha's birth, a wise elder named Asita had come down from the mountains to see the child. Wise elders had this habit at the time. They appeared at critical moments, said enigmatic things, and then disappeared before anyone could ask follow-up questions. Asita looked at the baby for a long moment and then cried. The king panicked. Asita explained that he was crying not because the child was doomed to suffering, but because he himself was too old to see what this child would become. He said that Siddhartha, when he grew up, would be one of two things: the greatest king the world had ever seen, or the greatest spiritual master that would ever exist. Suddhodana heard this and made an immediate decision. He would ensure that his son became the king, not the master. And to do this, he built 3 palaces. Not because he needed 3 palaces, but because each palace corresponded to a season of the year. The palace of heat, the palace of cold, the palace of rain. And in each of them, Siddhartha would live surrounded only by youth, beauty, health, and joy. No old person entered those walls, no sick person, no corpse was carried through those streets. Death, illness, and old age were literally banished from the prince's universe. And for years it worked. Siddhartha grew up being exactly what his father wanted: strong, bright, skilled with weapons and words, married to a woman of extraordinary beauty named Yasodhara, father of a son named Rahula, whose name, in an irony that neither of them realized at the time, means chain or obstacle. Was he happy? That is the wrong question. He did not know enough about unhappiness to answer. It's like asking someone who has never left their own room if they miss the sea. You cannot miss what you have never known. But there is a kind of restlessness, deeper than sadness, more diffuse than pain, that does not need a name to exist. Siddhartha had this restlessness. At night sometimes, he would wake up for no apparent reason. He would look at the ceiling painted with scenes of battles and victories, and gods in eternal festivities, and feel something he could not name. A wordless question, an invisible weight. He would go back to sleep. Life went on. The palaces shone. On the other side of the world, in distance, in time, in everything, there was an alley. It was not an alley of extreme poverty. It was not the kind of place where children sleep on sidewalks and rats share beds with the living. It was an alley of commerce, of survival, of a close-knit community. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where secrets last little and debts last long. Amsterdam, in the year 1632, was the most dynamic city in Europe. While the rest of the continent bled in religious wars, while the Inquisition still burned people in public squares in Spain and Portugal, Amsterdam had decided, with the pragmatic coldness of the Dutch, that trade was more profitable than persecution. And so, the city became a refuge for French Huguenots, for English Protestants, for intellectuals who elsewhere would be imprisoned, and for Jews, especially for Sephardic Jews who had escaped the Iberian Peninsula with the clothes on their backs and memories of bonfires. It was in this community, the Jewish community of Amsterdam, the freest that existed in Europe at that moment, but still a community with its own rules, its own fears, its own limits, that Baruch Spinoza was born. His father was named May Miguel offer and be cursed when he refuses. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed. May he be cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be cursed in his life and cursed in his death. May he be cursed in his coming in and cursed in his going out. May he be cursed in his wisdom and cursed in his ignorance. May he be cursed in his body and cursed in his soul. May he be cursed in his wealth and cursed in his poverty. May he be cursed in his health and cursed in his sickness. May he be cursed in his youth and cursed in his old age. May he be cursed in his family and cursed in his loneliness. May he be cursed in his joy and cursed in his sorrow. May he be cursed in his peace and cursed in his war. May he be cursed in his faith and cursed in his doubt. May he be a mal that few could match. He understood that he was slowly killing himself, yet he continued to work, driven by an insatiable need to think, to write, to explore the depths of existence. The glass dust was a constant reminder of his mortality, yet it also fueled his desire to uncover the truths that lay hidden beneath the surface of life. He was engaged in a battle against the very forces that sought to extinguish him, and in that struggle he found a sense of purpose. Spinoza's writings began to take shape during these years of labor and suffering. He poured his thoughts into pages filled with ideas that challenged the very foundations of traditional beliefs. He wrote about God, nature, and the universe, proposing a vision of a single substance that encompassed everything, a radical departure from the dualistic thinking that had dominated philosophy and theology. His ideas were revolutionary, and they attracted both admiration and condemnation. As he continued to refine his philosophy, Spinoza also grappled with the implications of his thoughts. He understood that his views would not only alienate him from the Jewish community, but also from the broader society that held tightly to established norms. Yet he remained undeterred. He believed that the pursuit of truth was worth any sacrifice, even if it meant living in isolation. In Rheinsberg, he found a small circle of friends who appreciated his intellect and shared his passion for inquiry. They engaged in discussions that spanned a wide range of topics, from ethics to metaphysics, and these conversations nourished Spinoza's mind. He was no longer alone in his quest. He had companions who understood the weight of his thoughts and the significance of his work. However, the toll of his labor was becoming increasingly evident. The glass dust continued to accumulate in his lungs, and his health deteriorated. He experienced bouts of coughing and fatigue, yet he pressed on, driven by an urgency to complete his magnum opus, Ethics. This work would encapsulate his philosophical system, presenting a comprehensive view of reality that sought to reconcile the divine with the natural world. As he wrote, he reflected on the nature of existence, the interconnectedness of all things, and the importance of understanding one's place within the grand tapestry of life. He argued that true freedom comes from knowledge, and that the path to enlightenment lies in the acceptance of reality as it is, rather than as one wishes it to be. Spinoza's ideas were not merely theoretical, they were deeply practical. He believed that understanding the nature of the universe could lead to a more compassionate and ethical way of living. He urged individuals to cultivate a sense of empathy and to recognize the shared struggles of humanity. In doing so, he hoped to foster a sense of unity that transcended the divisions of religion, culture, and ideology. Despite his declining health, Spinoza's determination never wavered. He continued to write and to engage with the world around him, even as he faced the specter of death. His legacy would not be defined by the limitations imposed upon him by society, but rather by the profound insights he offered to those willing to listen. In the end, Spinoza's life was a testament to the power of the human spirit to seek truth, even in the face of adversity. His journey mirrored that of Siddhartha, both men navigating the complexities of existence in their own unique ways. They were united by a common quest for understanding, a desire to penetrate the veil of illusion and to uncover the essence of reality. As we reflect on their stories, we are reminded of the importance of questioning, of seeking, and of embracing the uncertainties that life presents. The paths of Siddhartha and Spinoza may have diverged, but their legacies continue to inspire those who dare to explore the depths of their own existence. In a world filled with distractions and superficial answers, their journeys serve as a beacon for those who seek a deeper understanding of themselves and the universe. Geometric. And yet he continued polishing, not out of masochism, not out of indifference to his own life, but because he needed to survive, and surviving took time, and time was what he did not have in abundance, and every penny that came in with the lenses was one more day to write what needed to be written. There was an urgency in him that was not quite urgency, because urgency implies haste, and Spinoza was not in a hurry. It was something different. It was the clear awareness that there was work to be done, that he was the only one who could do it the way it was being done, and that time was finite. The glass dust entered. His lungs grew heavier. The writing continued. In his room in Rheinsberg, there was a small desk by the window that overlooked a garden where roses grew that no one had intentionally planted. They had simply appeared, like some good things appear without being called. Spinoza wrote with one hand and sometimes paused to cough with the other, doubled over for long seconds, and then returned to the sentence at the exact point where he had stopped, as if the interruption did not exist, as if the body were a parallel event occurring on an adjacent plane but not related to what mattered. And here is something that few people realize when studying Spinoza. The geometric method he used to write, that austere, rigorous style of definitions, axioms, propositions, and demonstrations that has driven readers away over the centuries, was not merely stylistic. It was not just intellectual. It was a spiritual practice. It was a form of discipline of the mind analogous, in many ways, to what Siddhartha had attempted with meditation, a way to train the consciousness to see things sub specie aeternitatis, under the perspective of eternity, to see each event, each emotion, each situation, not as something happening to you, but as something happening in the necessary order of the universe, not as personal tragedy, as an expression of a logic that transcends the personal. And this was what was destroying him. Not the glass dust destroyed the body. But the geometric method demanded something deeper. It required him to look at his own pain, at his own loneliness, at his own excommunication, at his own mortality, and see it not as injustice, not as tragedy, but as necessity, as the only way things could have been. And there is no more complete destruction than this. There is one thing that none of the philosophy teachers usually mention when they talk about Buddha or Spinoza: the fear. Not the banal, everyday fear, the kind that arises when you hear a strange noise in the dark, but the specific fear that accompanies the realization that the structure you use to interpret the world is crumbling, and that beneath it there is no other structure waiting. There is only the abyss. Siddhartha sat under the fig tree at the end of an ordinary afternoon. The birds made their last noise before dusk. The Niranjana river flowed a short distance away, with the particular sound that rivers have when the light is fading, denser, slower, as if the water also knew it was time to change register. The leaves of the fig tree, the Ficus religiosa, which would later be known as Bodhi, the tree of awakening, made that particular movement that heart-shaped leaves make when there is a light breeze. They trembled at the tip, like children who can hardly stay still, and Siddhartha sat, not with a goal, not with a method, not with any of the systems he had learned and discarded over the past 6 years, with nothing, with the weariness of one who has exhausted the techniques, with the strange freedom that exists on the other side of maximum effort, when you stop not because you have given up, but because you realize that the very attempt was the obstacle. The texts describe what happened that night in different ways, with symbolic languages that have been added over the centuries by traditions that needed to create narrative around something that by nature resists narrative. There are demons, there are temptations, there are revelations in phases, the vision of past lives, the vision of the cycle of birth and death of all beings, and then the vision of the Four Noble Truths. But there is a cleaner way to understand what happened that night. Siddhartha stopped fighting against what was, not in the sense of giving up, not in the sense of passive resignation, but in the sense of a perception so fundamental that it is hard to express it without sounding banal. He saw that suffering was not a mistake in the system. It was the system. And more than that, he saw that what we call I, this continuous sense of being a separate individual, carrying a story, with desires and fears and memories, was not reality. It was a construction, a narrative that the mind tells itself with such consistency and such speed that it becomes indistinguishable from experience. There was no Siddhartha separate from the universe, looking at it from the outside and suffering because of it. There was only the universe happening, and what we call Siddhartha was a pattern within that happening, no more separate from the river, the leaves, the birds, and the wind than a wave is separate from the ocean. The wave is not in the ocean. The wave is the ocean making a wave. And when this perception settled in, not as an idea, not as a concept to be believed, but as direct experience, like seeing a color you had never seen before and that has no name, the weight disappeared. Not because the problems of the world disappeared, not because old age, sickness, and death ceased to exist, but because the I that suffered from these things had been seen for what it was, a story. And stories can be lived lightly, even when they are dramatic, when you know they are stories. At dawn, Siddhartha looked at the morning star, and what came next was what was recorded in tradition as his first speech after awakening, a speech that, regardless of whether it was said exactly like this or not, accurately captures what had been discovered. For countless rebirths I sought in vain the builder of this house. What pain, to be born again and again. But now, builder, you have been found. You will not build the house again. Your rafters are broken, the ridgepole is destroyed. The mind, reaching the uncreated, has found the end of desire. The builder was the ego. The house was the illusion of separation, and the broken rafters were the thought structures that held the construction up. In Amsterdam, Spinoza's moment of opening did not come in a night. It came in a proposition. More specifically, in Proposition 42 of Book 5 of the Ethics, the book that took almost 20 years to write, and that was published only posthumously because Spinoza knew that publishing it in life would be to sign his own sentence of social, intellectual, and possibly literal death. But before arriving at the proposition itself, it is necessary to understand the structure of the building that Spinoza had constructed. The Ethics begins not with observations about human experience, it begins with God, but not the God that the synagogue had expelled Spinoza for questioning, not the God who hears prayers and punishes sinners and chooses peoples and interferes in history. Spinoza began with a definition. By substance, I understand that which exists in itself and is conceived by itself, that is, that whose concept does not need the concept of any other thing to be formed. And from there he demonstrated, with the rigorous logic of a geometer who draws lines that cannot be otherwise, that only one substance can exist, one only. Infinite, without limits, without outside. And this substance, this unique and infinite being that exists by its own necessity, that was not created because there was nothing prior to it to create it, is what Spinoza called God or nature. God and nature, not two things, one. Deus sive natura. This formula, too small for the revolution it contains, means the following. There is no God separate from the universe, looking at it from the outside, governing it from above. The universe was not created by God. The universe is God, in the only form in which God can exist. And we, every human being, every animal, every plant, every stone, every star, are modes of this infinite substance. We are the universe happening in particular ways. We are not in the universe. We are the universe, taking temporary forms. This means, and here Spinoza needs to be quoted carefully because it is easy to distort, that we are not free in the sense of being able to escape nature. There is no free will as a magical force that operates outside the chain of causes and effects. Every thought we have is caused by previous thoughts. which were caused by prior experiences, which were caused by earlier events, tracing back to the very beginning of everything. We are necessary, not in the sense that we are important, but in the sense that we cannot be anything other than what we are, given everything that preceded us, and this is the step that most readers cannot follow without stopping and breathing. Spinoza asks, if we understand this clearly, what happens to suffering? Suffering, Spinoza says, arises from ignorance, not ignorance of factual information, but ignorance of the nature of things. When we suffer because of something that happened, we are treating that event as if it were a mistake, as if the universe had erred in relation to us, as if there were a better version of things that was unjustly denied. But if everything that happens is a necessary expression of the infinite substance, if each event is exactly what the order of causes required it to be, then there is no error. There is only what is. And understanding this, truly understanding this, not just repeating the words, is what Spinoza calls freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want. The freedom to want what you have no choice but to do. The freedom to act from one's own nature, rather than being dragged by forces you do not understand. And Proposition 42 simply states, blessedness is not the reward of virtue, but virtue itself. There is no paradise afterward. There is no future reward for present suffering. Understanding, clarity, the vision of things as they are, is in itself the best possible condition of existence. It is the home. It is the destination. It is the present, seen with eyes that have stopped fighting against what is. And here, for the first time, the two systems touch with a precision that sends chills, Buddha said. Suffering arises from desire and attachment to an illusion of a permanent and separate self. Spinoza said, suffering arises from not understanding that we are necessary expressions of a unique and infinite substance. One used the language of silence. The other used the language of geometry, but they were pointing to the same horizon. And the horizon was not out there. It never was. There are truths that the world does not tolerate. Not because the world is evil, not because there are deliberate conspiracies to suppress knowledge, but because certain truths are incompatible with the structures that societies build to survive. And when a truth threatens the structure reacts, with the same blind instinct with which an organism reacts to a virus, not because the virus is necessarily evil, but because it is different and the different activates the defense mechanisms. Siddhartha, after awakening under the fig tree, remained silent for weeks. The texts speak of 49 days of immobility, a period in which he simply sat or walked slowly around the tree, processing what had happened. But there is another element in this story that rarely receives the attention it deserves. Siddhartha considered not to teach. It was not a brief consideration. It was a genuine, deep doubt that lasted long enough to be recorded. The essence of the doubt was this: what he had seen was so fundamental, so contrary to the way human beings usually think about themselves, that trying to explain it would be like trying to translate a color for someone who has never seen it. The words created by human thought are all built on the premise of separation, subject and object, I, and the world, the observer and the observed. Using these words to describe a perception that dissolves that separation is, by definition, distorting what one wants to communicate. It is using illusion to point beyond illusion, and yet something convinced him. Tradition says it was Brahma, the creator, who descended from heaven and begged Siddhartha to teach. Modern historians say it was probably simply compassion, the inability to look at other beings suffering unnecessarily when there was something that could be shared. Siddhartha went to the deer park in Sarnath, near Varanasi, where the 5 ascetics who had abandoned him were still practicing their mortifications. They saw him arrive and said to each other, "We will not speak to him. He abandoned the path. He is a failure who returned to the pleasures of the world." But when he got closer, something changed. It was not a dramatic transformation. There was no supernatural light or voice from heaven. It was simply that he arrived, and his presence was different. Not different in the way a famous person is different, or in the way a powerful person is different. Different in a way that has no easy name. The difference of someone who has stopped needing anything from the world, and therefore the world can no longer use its usual tools of intimidation or seduction with that person. The 5 ascetics fell silent. Then they sat down. Then they asked him to speak. And Siddhartha taught what became known as the first discourse, the presentation of the 4 noble truths. The first, there is suffering, not as an accident or punishment, but as a structural characteristic of conditioned existence. Birth is entering into suffering. Aging is suffering. Sickness and death are suffering. Not getting what you want is suffering. Getting what you want and then losing it is suffering. The second, suffering has an origin, and the origin is craving, the desire accompanied by attachment, the need for things to be different from what they are, the impulse to grasp pleasure and push away pain. The third, the origin can cease. This is not utopia. It is a demonstrable possibility. The fourth, there is a path that leads to cessation, not a magical path, a practical path of 8 elements that begins with right understanding and passes through right intention, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness and meditation. Simple to state, monumentally difficult to live. The world heard this teaching and did what it always does with uncomfortable truths. It partially absorbed it, distorted the rest, and transformed a practice of liberation into a religion of comfort. The doctrine of karma became a system of celestial rewards and punishments. Nirvana became a paradise for after death. Buddha became a fat god with a golden belly that you rub for good luck in business. And the truth that had been stated with such precision was buried under layers of ritual, institution, hierarchy, and interest. Not immediately. It took centuries. But it did. With Spinoza, the process was faster, not because his truth was more fragile, but because the world in which he lived was more organized in its capacity to destroy what threatened it. The ethics was circulated among friends in manuscript form for years before Spinoza's death. He knew that publishing it would be dangerous. 17th century Europe had zero tolerance for what his book contained, the geometric demonstration that God and nature were the same thing, that there was no personal divine providence, that the Bible had been written by men with specific political interests, that the soul was not immortal in the traditional sense. Each of these ideas was, separately, enough to destroy a career. Together, in a single book, they were a declaration of war. Spinoza knew this. That is why he kept it hidden. But there was one book he allowed to be published while he was still alive, the Tractatus Theologico-Politicus from 1670, a critical analysis of the scriptures and a defense of freedom of thought and political expression. The reaction was immediate and violent. It was called a book forged in hell by a renegade Jew and the devil. It was banned in almost all of Christian Europe. Religious authorities demanded it be burned. Philosophers who read it publicly were forced to publicly retract. And this was Spinoza's most moderate book. When he died in February 1677, at the age of 44, his lungs finally defeated by the accumulated glass dust, his friends immediately published the Ethics. A few months later, it was already on the Vatican's list of prohibited books. It remained there for over 300 years. But something curious happens with truths that are suppressed. They do not die. They go underground. They circulate among those who recognize each other by the type of questions they ask. They pass from hand to hand in manuscripts, in letters, in whispered conversations in university town cafes. Goethe read it and said he had found his mirror. Einstein, when asked if he believed in God, replied, "I believe in the God of Spinoza, the universe as rational order, not a personal being who cares about the fate of individuals." Hegel absorbed it and built upon it. Nietzsche recognized it as a precursor to his own ideas about beyond good and of evil. The truth of Spinoza did not die. It merely waited, with the patience of one who knows that things cannot be any different than they are. And the Buddhists who preserved what Buddha had said with more care, those who refused to turn practice into dogma, also waited. In the mountains of Tibet, in the monasteries of Japan, in the forests of Sri Lanka, in lines of transmission that passed from master to disciple, not through books but through direct experience. They waited until the world was ready to hear again, or at least more ready than it had been. What they had discovered was dangerous, not because it was obscure. It was dangerous because it was clear, because if you truly understand what Buddha and Spinoza were saying, you cannot continue living as before. You cannot keep treating the self as the center around which the universe revolves. You cannot continue believing that suffering is an injustice committed against you by an inattentive universe. You cannot keep waiting for happiness to arrive when external circumstances finally align the way you want. And societies, and especially societies organized around religious hierarchies, systems of reward and punishment, promises of paradise and threats of hell, do not easily survive the discovery that none of this is necessary. That freedom does not come from outside, that the present, this exact moment, with all its problems and imperfections and pains, is already the only place where peace can be found. This is a dangerous teaching. For any structure that needs your dissatisfaction to continue existing, you believe that you exist. This seems so obvious that it is ridiculous to mention. Of course you exist. You are here reading these words, with a body, a history, a memory of yesterday and expectations for tomorrow. You have a name. You have a face that you recognize in the mirror. You have preferences and fears and loves and scars. How could you not exist? But here is the question that both Buddha and Spinoza ask, in different languages, with different methods, but with the same surgical precision. What exactly is the you that exists? Not the body. The body you know is not permanent. The cells of your liver are completely replaced in a few months. The atoms that make up your bones today are not the same as those that made up your bones 7 years ago. The body you have now is materially different from the body you had in childhood, in adolescence last year. And yet you say I, as if there were an unbreakable continuity. Not the memories. Memories change. Every time you remember something, you are remembering the last time you remembered, not the original event. Memory is reconstructed with each access, slightly modified by your current moods, by your present values, by the person you are now. The past that you carry as yours is an edited, curated, constantly rewritten version, not the thoughts. Thoughts appear in consciousness like clouds appear in the sky. You do not choose them, you do not summon them deliberately, they arise. Modern neuroscience confirms what the most experienced meditators have discovered through direct observation. The feeling that you decide to have a thought is itself a thought. Free will is subjectively experienced. Here's almost always a narrative that the mind constructs after the event has already begun. So what remains? That is the question. And it is exactly here that the ground disappears beneath your feet. Buddhism has a concept called anatta, often translated as not self. But the translation is unsatisfactory because it sounds like a denial of something that exists, when in fact the doctrine is more precise than that. Anatta does not say you do not exist. It says something more subtle and disturbing. The you that you believe you are, the central, permanent, separate agent that observes the world from within a fixed point and makes decisions from it. That you is not found anywhere when you look for it with sufficient attention. Buddha used to do an exercise with his disciples. He would ask them to observe experiences attentively and then ask, is this mine? Is this me? Is this myself? The body? Is this mine? Do you control the heart? Do you decide when to age? Do you choose to feel pain? No, the body happens and you observe. The sensations. Is this me? Sensations arise and pass, pleasant or unpleasant, without you summoning them. There is no permanent you that possesses them. The perceptions. Is this myself? You see what light and the nervous system allow you to see. Perception is a process, not a neutral window to an objective reality. The mental formations, intentions, emotions, impulses. Is this mine? Anger, joy, sadness, desire arise like the wind, like waves, like clouds. You can observe them. But an observer is not the same as the observed. Consciousness itself is this me. Consciousness is also impermanent. It exists as long as there are conditions for it to exist. In deep sleep, it disappears. In certain meditative states, it disappears. It is not the solid foundation it seems to be. And then Buddha would ask, if you are not the body, not the sensations, not the perceptions, not the mental formations, not the consciousness, where is the you? The answer that practice produces is not verbal. It is the direct perception that the I is a process, a continuous activity of identity construction from constantly flowing experiences. Like a flame, which is not a fixed thing but the process of combustion happening, the flame you see now is not the same flame it was a second ago, but it is continuous enough to seem the same, and we are like that. Continuity without fixed substance, process without permanent essence. Spinoza arrived at the same place by a completely different path, and arrived with such geometric precision that the conclusion becomes almost inevitable for those who follow the reasoning. If God and nature are the same thing, if there is only one infinite substance and everything that exists is an expression of that substance, then what are we? We are modes, not independent substances, not immortal souls created separately by the whim of a creator. Modes, temporary modifications of the infinite substance, just as waves are modes of the ocean, not separate from the ocean, not existing independently of the ocean, but also not being the entire ocean. And the human mind, for Spinoza, is the idea that the body has of itself. This sentence deserves to be read again. The mind is the idea that the body has of itself. Not a separate entity that inhabits the body like a ghost inhabits a house. Not an immortal soul that temporarily uses the body as an instrument. The mind is the thinking aspect of what the body is as an extensive aspect. They are the same being, seen from two angles, what Spinoza calls the two attributes of the substance that we can know, thought and extension. What does this imply for identity? It implies that there is no I separate from the universe observing it from the outside. It implies that the feeling of separation, this everyday experience of being an isolated individual in a world of other isolated individuals, is an incomplete perception. It is seeing the wave and not seeing the ocean. Spinoza calls this incomplete perception knowledge of the first kind, knowledge through sensory impressions and imagination, which is inherently fragmentary, partial, and produces reactive emotions like fear, envy, hatred, and hope. When we reach knowledge of the second kind, understanding causal relationships, the laws of nature, reason, we see more, we suffer less, we become less slaves to reactive emotions. But the third kind of knowledge, what Spinoza calls intuitive science, scientia intuitiva, is when we see each particular thing sub specie eternitatis, under the perspective of eternity. When we see each event not as an accident that happens to us, but as a necessary expression of the infinite substance. At this point, Spinoza says the intellectual love of God arises naturally, not as religious devotion, not as warm feeling, but as the joy that accompanies deep understanding, the joy of seeing that you are not a mistake in the universe, not an accident, not a lost creature in an indifferent cosmos. You are the universe, happening in this specific form, for a specific period, with this specific configuration of body and mind and history. And when this is seen, truly seen, not just intellectually understood, what Spinoza calls human servitude, the slavery of reactive emotions, begins to yield. Not completely, not at once, but it yields. Two men, two systems, the same image, the self as process, not as substance, as activity, not as entity, as wave, not as stone at the bottom of the ocean. And the implication, which is terrifying, is that the search for security, for permanence, for a self that will persist beyond all change and all loss, is a search that cannot be satisfied, not because the universe is cruel, but because what you are looking for does not exist in the way you are searching for it, and to stop searching is not resignation. It is the only way to arrive at where you have always been. There is a persistent misunderstanding about the two systems we are exploring, a misunderstanding that serves the interests of those who prefer that these teachings remain academic theory, distant from everyday experience, harmless on the philosophy shelf of the bookstore. The misunderstanding is this: if you dissolve the illusion of the ego, if you realize that the separate and permanent self does not have the substance it seems to have, if you understand that you are a wave in the ocean and not a stone at the bottom, what remains? The question usually comes laden with a specific anxiety. If there is no real self, why do anything? If there is no free will in the conventional sense, why care? If suffering is inherent to conditioned existence, what's the point? It seems that the inevitable outcome of the teachings of Buddha and Spinoza would be a cold nihilism, a passive indifference, a disengagement from the world. But it is exactly the opposite. And this is what most surprises those who follow both systems to the end. Siddhartha, after awakening, did not become a recluse. He did not go to some cave in the mountains to live in solitary silence for the rest of his life. He taught for 45 years. 45 years traversing the paths of northeastern India, from town to town, from kingdom to kingdom, conversing with beggars and kings, with courtesans and Brahmins, with murderers and saints, with people in acute crisis and people who were simply curious. The compassion, karuna in Pali, that emerged after awakening was not a moral decision. It was not a religious obligation. It was not the result of a divine command that said, "You must be compassionate." It was the natural response to seeing the suffering of others as a mirror of one's own suffering. When the illusion of separation dissolves, even partially, even temporarily, the pain of the other is no longer something distant, happening to a being completely separate from you. It is closer. It is more visceral, not because you confuse your pain with the pain of the other, but because you stop using the ego as a filter that transforms every situation into, "What does this mean for me?" And when that filter gives way, even a little, what remains is a cleaner attention, a more real presence, an ability to hear what the other is saying rather than just listening to what confirms or threatens your narrative. This is compassion, not sentimentality, not pity, not condescending charity. The ability to be present in the suffering of the other without needing to flee from it, fix it immediately, or turn it into an instrument to feel good. Buddhism calls it bodhisattva, literally awakened being, one who, having touched awakening, chooses to remain in the world to help other beings cross the same river. Not because it is obligatory, but because once you see what there is to be seen, the natural response is to want others to see it too. It is like having found the exit of a maze and encountering people who continue walking in the wrong corridors. Compassion is not stopping to walk. It is going back a bit and saying, "This corridor leads back to the beginning." Try this way. In Spinoza, the equivalent of Buddhist compassion has a philosophical name, amor intellectualis Dei, the intellectual love of God. But before explaining what it is necessary to undo what it seems to be. It is not love in the sentimental sense. It is not the warm emotion we feel for close people. It is not a state of mystical ecstasy. It is the joy. Spinoza specifically uses the word Laetitia, joy, that accompanies the increase of our capacity to understand. Because for Spinoza, every expansion of understanding is an increase in our power to exist, and every increase in the power to exist is accompanied by joy, not superficial pleasure. Joy in the deepest sense, the satisfaction of functioning fully according to one's own nature. And the intellectual love of God is the supreme form of this joy, when understanding expands enough to encompass not just this particular event, but the necessary order of the whole. When you see not just the wave, but the ocean, and recognize that you are both, what emerges from this is not indifference, it is generosity. Because a person who does not need approval does not use others as mirrors of validation. A person who understands their own nature with sufficient clarity does not project their own insecurities onto others. A person who has seen that suffering arises from confusion, not from malice, not from vice, not from moral weakness, cannot hate what they do not understand. Spinoza wrote in a letter, "I neither laugh nor cry at human actions, I merely understand them." This phrase is often misinterpreted as cold, as distant, as arrogant. But read it again. I do not laugh, not because I am better than others, but because the laughter that diminishes the other comes from a position of superiority that I do not claim. I do not cry, not because I do not feel, but because the crying that paralyzes comes from a resistance to what is necessary, and I have stopped resisting what I cannot change. I merely understand, not as an evasion of feeling, but as the deepest form of presence that he had found. And merely understanding, in Spinoza's sense, in the sense of an understanding that is not cold intellectual, but intellectual rooted in the perception of the whole, is a form of love. The most enduring form of love, because it does not depend on anything external to sustain itself. The two systems then arrive at the same luminous paradox. The more you dissolve the attachment to the self, the more you become capable of genuinely being with others. The more you stop using the world as confirmation of what you want to believe, the more you can see the world as it truly is. The less you need circumstances to be different to feel well-being, the more energy you have to act effectively in circumstances as they are. This is not indifference, it is the basis of real action. Siddhartha spent 45 years transforming lives not despite detachment, but because of it. Spinoza spent the last years of his life responding to letters from people all over Europe, people who had read his writings and wanted to dialogue, question, understand, with a generosity of attention that surprised those who expected to find a hermetic and distant philosopher. Both were, in everyday practice, incredibly present, because when you stop spending energy protecting an illusion, that energy goes somewhere. It goes to the only place where it has always been needed, here, now, with what is before you. There is a specific moment in the history of Western philosophy that almost no one knows. It is not in textbooks. It is not celebrated on commemorative dates. It has no statue or monument, but it happened. And what happened was this. A man named Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, one of the greatest mathematicians in Europe, co-inventor of differential calculus, a philosopher of the highest caliber, traveled to The Hague in the autumn of 1676 to visit Spinoza in person. He stayed with him for several days. They talked. Leibniz read manuscripts that had not yet been published. And after that, Leibniz spent the rest of his life categorically denying that he had gone to The Hague, that he had spoken with Spinoza, that he had read anything of his. Because admitting that he had been in that house, in that room smelling of polished glass and fresh paint, was too dangerous. The idea of Spinoza was contaminating. That is how the time perceived it, not as moral pollution, but as genuine intellectual contamination, as if certain questions, once formulated clearly enough, could no longer be answered with the old answers. And Leibniz knew this. That is why he denied it. That is why he lied. But the conversation had happened. And the ideas that were exchanged that autumn of 1676, a few months before Spinoza died, echoed silently for centuries in European philosophy, like a subsoil supporting buildings whose architects do not know what they are building. I tell this not as historical curiosity. I tell this because it illustrates something central in what we are exploring. The truth of Spinoza, and by extension, the truth of Buddha, has this particular characteristic. It is hard to deny once it has been understood. Not because it is dogma, not because it creates emotional dependency, but because, once you see the structure of the argument, once you feel in your own experience what meditation produces, you simply cannot unsee it. The problem is not understanding. The problem is what to do after understanding. Let's place the two systems side by side with a clarity that we may not have fully achieved yet. Buddha starts with experience. He observes suffering, not as an abstract concept, but as the raw data of human life. And then he asks, what is the structure of suffering? What produces it? What maintains it? The answer that meditation gradually reveals, with a precision that increases with the depth of practice, is this. Suffering is not caused by events. It is caused by the relationship we establish with events. It is caused by the belief that it should be different, by the resistance to what is, by the attachment to the idea that there is a permanent self that is being harmed, threatened, inadequately rewarded. Remove the attachment to the permanent self, not as an idea but as direct experience, and suffering does not disappear. But it loses its poison. Physical pain is still pain. Loss is still loss. Death is still death. But the layer of resistance, of this shouldn't be happening to me, of how can the universe do this, disappears. What remains is clean pain, and clean pain is bearable. It is even in a sense that only those who have gone through it can understand, profoundly human, profoundly real, more real than the secondary suffering we construct around the original pain. Spinoza starts with thought. He does not meditate in the Buddhist sense. He demonstrates, he builds, he draws logical lines with the precision of a geometer who knows that each angle needs justification, that each conclusion must necessarily derive from the premises, that the entire structure collapses if a single piece does not hold. And what he demonstrates, what inevitably emerges from the chain of definitions, axioms, and propositions, is that the idea of separation is a confusion of perspective, not a moral error, not a sin, a confusion, like confusing the map with the territory, like looking at the moon through a pointed finger and seeing the finger. We are modes of an infinite substance that has no outside, that has no other, that is the totality of everything that exists. And the feeling of being a separate individual, real as experience, necessary as a practical point of orientation in the world, is not the complete story. It is the map, useful, necessary, but not the territory. And here is where the two systems merge into a single point of pressure. Buddha says, the self that suffers is constructed. It is process, not substance. And when you see this directly, the construction loses its strength. Spinoza says, the self separate from the infinite substance is an incomplete perception, an abstraction that, treated as total reality, produces emotional servitude. And when you see this clearly, reason begins to guide what was previously dragged by confusion. One speaks of process, the other speaks of perspective. But both are saying that the problem is not in the circumstances of your life. It is in the structure with which you interpret the circumstances of your life. And that is both the most liberating and the most terrifying thing there is. It is liberating because it implies that the source of suffering is accessible. It is not in a past that cannot be changed. It is not in an uncertain future. It is here, in the structure of perception which can be examined, understood, transformed. It is terrifying because it implies that there is no one else to blame. Not the universe, not others, not circumstances. The confusion is here inside, and unraveling it requires the kind of honesty that most of us spend our whole lives avoiding. There is a Zen story, and Zen is the tradition that most explicitly tries to merge analytical rigor with direct perception, which in many ways is the Buddhist child raised with Confucian elements that comes closest to the spirit of Spinoza, about a monk who asks the master, "What is the Buddha?" And the master replies, "The mind is the Buddha." Sometime later, another monk asks the same question, and the master replies, "Without mind, no Buddha." The first monk, upon hearing this, becomes confused. He goes to the master and says, "You told me that the mind is the Buddha. Now you tell this other monk that there is no mind and no Buddha. What is the right answer?" And the master says, "Both." This is an answer that Spinoza would appreciate, because ethics also works this way. It builds a complete and rigorous system about the nature of God, mind, body, emotions, and freedom. And at the end of the system, what is perceived is that the categories used to build the system were tools, not ultimate realities. Tools that point beyond themselves. Like fingers pointing to the moon. You use the finger to find the moon. But after finding the moon, you no longer need to keep looking at the finger. So what is the terrifying truth, finally named with all the clarity that this journey allows? It is this: you have never been what you thought you were, not in the sense that you are less than you thought, but in the sense that you are simultaneously much smaller and infinitely greater. Smaller, the self with defined boundaries, with permanent essence, with control over experience, with a heroic trajectory of rise or fall. That self is a construction, useful, necessary for practical life, but a construction. Greater, what you really are, what both systems point to when taken to the limit, is consciousness itself happening. It is the infinite substance expressing itself in this specific configuration for this specific period. It is the universe experiencing itself through this particular perspective. You are not in the world. You are the world happening here. And when this perception settles in, even if for a moment, even if briefly, even if soon covered again by the usual layers of thought and worry, something changes that does not return to the previous state completely, like a door that you know exists. Even when it is closed, you know it exists, and knowing that the door exists is already different from never having seen the door. Buddha died knowing this, Spinoza died knowing this, and both spent their lives not keeping this knowledge to themselves, but seeking, each with the instruments that life had given them, ways to communicate what by nature resists communication. Not because they were saints, because they had seen something that made it impossible not to try to show, like someone who finds the exit of the labyrinth and returns. No thank you, not for reward, but because compassion, in the purest sense of the word, prior to sentimentality and moral obligation, is what happens naturally when you stop using all your energy protecting an illusion. The energy goes somewhere, and that place is the other. The story of Western and Eastern spirituality is, to a large extent, the story of a war against the body. It is not hard to understand why. The body hurts. The body ages. The body gets sick. The body desires things that create complications. The body is hungry, is sleepy, is thirsty, has urges that arise without warning, and can destroy reputations, families, empires. The body dies. And if the goal is peace, if the goal is liberation, if the goal is to reach some state of clarity that is above the chaos of everyday existence, it seems obvious that the body is the problem. This is what much of spiritual thought has concluded. The Gnostics said that the body was the prison of the soul, created by an inferior demiurge, a trap of flesh and bone that the spirit needed to transcend to return to the original light. The Neoplatonists, following Plato, said that the true philosopher spends life practicing death, learning to detach from the body so that pure reason can function without interference. Certain branches of Christianity turn the body into a moral battleground, the flesh against the spirit, sin incarnate, mortification as a holy practice. And the ascetics that Siddhartha followed for 6 years, the ones who abandoned him indignantly when he accepted Sujata's bowl of rice, were the most radical version of this idea. Destroy the body sufficiently, and the truth will appear in the space that remains. But both Buddha and Spinoza came to a different conclusion, and the difference is significant enough to deserve an entire block. After awakening, Siddhartha formulated what became known as the middle way. The name is simple enough to be misleading. Middle way sounds like moderation, like the wise advice not to overdo it, like the popular wisdom that says neither too much nor too little, like a philosophical version of everything in moderation, the kind of thing grandparents say about dessert. But it is not that. The middle way is not the midpoint between excess and deprivation. It is a third category. It is the discovery that both excess and deprivation are variations of the same fundamental error. The idea that manipulating external conditions, and the body is a condition, the most immediate of all, will produce the inner peace you are seeking. Siddhartha had tried both extremes with a radicality that few human beings in history have achieved. He had lived in the most luxurious palace, with the most refined pleasures, protected from all suffering, and he had almost starved in search of enlightenment through the destruction of the body. And both paths led to the same place. Restlessness persisted. The middle way says, the problem is not in the level of comfort or discomfort of the body. The problem is in the belief that peace is conditioned by anything external, including the state of the body. The body is not the enemy. The body is not a temple in the sense of a sacred thing to be worshipped. The body is the vehicle. It is the instrument through which experience happens. Treating it well is wise, not out of morality, but out of practicality. A well-cared-for instrument works better. Mortifying it is ignorance, not holiness. And the most radical, the body is not the obstacle between you and the truth. The body is often the most direct path to it. Buddhist meditation begins with the breath, with the physical sensation of air coming in and out, with the perception of sensations in the body, heat, cold, pressure, tingling, without reacting, without labeling, without building a story on top. Not because the body is sacred, but because the body is always here, now. While the mind can travel to the past and the future, the body exists only in the present. And the present, this exact moment, this instant, is the only place where direct perception is possible. The body is an anchor in the only moment where truth can be found. In Spinoza, the relationship with the body is even more radically different from what the previous philosophical tradition had produced. Descartes, the philosopher who dominated European thought in the 17th century and whose work Spinoza read with critical attention, had divided the human being into two completely separate substances, the res cogitans, the thinking thing, and the res extensa, the extended thing, the physical body. The problem that Descartes never satisfactorily resolved was, how do these two completely different substances interact? How does the mind move the body? How does the body affect the mind? Descartes tried various mechanisms, none worked, because the problem was in the premise. Spinoza saw this with unrelenting clarity. If there is only one substance, Deus sive natura, then mind and body are not two substances that interact. They are two attributes of the same thing, two ways of describing the same event. When you feel anger, there is simultaneously a mental configuration, thoughts, intentions, narratives, and a bodily configuration, hormones, muscle tension, heart rate, posture. It is not that the mind causes the body or the body causes the mind. They are the same event, viewed from two angles, like the front and back of a sheet of paper. You cannot have the front without the back. You cannot fold just one side. They are inseparable, not because one causes the other, but because they are two aspects of the same thing. This has an implication that Spinoza carefully works through in the Ethics, and that neuroscience continues to confirm today. You cannot transform the mind without transforming the body, and you cannot transform the body without transforming the mind. They are the same process. Spinoza says in one of the most quoted propositions of the Ethics, "No one yet knows what a body can do." This phrase, written in the 17th century, remains one of the most honest and open observations that philosophy has ever produced about human nature. Not, the body is limited. Not, the body is inferior to the mind. But, we do not know what is possible. The exploration is still incomplete. The boundaries have not yet been found. It is a phrase that points inward, not to mystification, but to genuine inquiry. And here is where the two systems converge again, but in a way that is rarely articulated. Both Buddha and Spinoza reject dualism. Buddha rejects the separation between body and spirit by teaching that the path begins with direct perception of bodily sensations, that the body is not an obstacle, but an instrument of investigation. That liberation is not freeing oneself from the body, but freeing oneself from confusion about the body. Spinoza rejects Cartesian dualism by demonstrating that mind and body are inseparable expressions of the same substance, that there is no hierarchy between them, that real well-being requires attention to both as inseparable faces of the same being. Both are saying, there is nowhere to escape. The body is where life happens, the mind is where life is interpreted, and both are the same event. Liberation, whether called nirvana or beatitude, is not achieved by fleeing the body to some purely spiritual realm. It is achieved by changing the relationship with what is already here, with what has always been here, with the breath, with sensations, with the thoughts that arise and pass, with the body that ages, with the life that is impermanent. The third option that no one mentions, neither unrestrained pleasure nor ascetic mortification, is simply this: being with what is, without fighting against, without getting lost in, just present. And present is not a state of mind that you achieve once and maintain forever. It is a choice that is made, lost, and made again, with every breath, with every moment, throughout life. Siddhartha taught for 45 years and never said he had reached a permanent state of perfection where the body and its demands had been transcended. He ate, he slept, he felt pain when he was sick. He suffered from back pain at the end of his life due to decades of seated meditation. The texts record that sometimes he asked Ananda, his closest disciple, to make the bed because his body was tired, a Buddha with back pain asking someone to make the bed. This is more revealing than 1,000 sermons on transcendence. Spinoza polished glass lenses until a few days before he died, even with his lungs destroyed, even coughing blood, not because he was a masochist, because the physical work of the lenses and the intellectual work of philosophy were for him the same thing, expressions of his nature, functioning as best as possible under the circumstances that were his. Without drama, without performative transcendence, just a man doing what he could with what he had, while it lasted. There is a question that is not philosophical, but is the most philosophical of all. Why does the present never seem enough? You are in a good moment, a meal with people you love, a sunny afternoon after weeks of rain, the rare silence of a morning without obligations. And even in that moment, something inside you is half a step out, thinking about what comes next, calculating how long this will last, comparing it to memories of better moments or expectations of future moments. The present arrives. You are not completely in it. This is not a weakness of character. It is not pathological distraction. It is the habitual structure of the human mind, the same mind that allowed the species to survive by anticipating dangers and planning strategies. The same mind that built civilizations by projecting futures that did not yet exist. But this same capacity to anticipate, to plan, to compare, to narrate, is what prevents the present from being lived from within. Most of us live in the present as tourists, passing through, photographing, already thinking about the next stop. Buddha was extraordinarily specific about this. In one of his most practical teachings, the Satipatthana Sutta, which could be translated as the foundations of attention, he detailed an entire practice based on a single instruction: be present, not as a motivational slogan, as a technical instruction. When you walk, know that you are walking. When you stand, know that you are standing. When you breathe, feel the breath. When you eat, savor what you are eating. When there is pain, observe the pain. When there is pleasure, observe the pleasure. When a thought arises, observe the thought arising, and observe it passing. The goal is not to become numb with presence. It is not to eliminate thoughts about the future or the past. The goal is to realize that you are thinking while you are thinking, that you are worrying while you are worrying, that you are telling a story about what is happening while it is happening. And when you realize this, when attention turns to itself and sees the narrative process in action, there is a moment of openness, a moment when the space between the event and the reaction appears, and in that space, however small it may be, there is freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, the freedom not to be automatically dragged by the next impulse. Buddhism calls this mindfulness, sati in Pali, and it is, at the same time, the simplest and the most difficult method that exists. Simple, because it is available at any moment without any special equipment, without any prior belief, without any authorization from any authority. Difficult because it goes against the deepest habit of the mind, which is constantly leaving where it is to go to where it is not. Spinoza arrived at the problem of time by a different path, but he arrived. In the Ethics, he distinguishes two modes of existence in time. The first is existence in duration, duratio, which is how we ordinarily experience time, as a sequence of moments, before and after, a past that no longer exists and a future that does not yet exist, and a present that is always about to become past. In this mode of existence, we are necessarily subject to impermanence. Everything we value can be lost. Every good moment will end. Every loved one will die. And imagination, which is the faculty that Spinoza associates with first-kind knowledge, the lowest, operates precisely in this register. It projects future losses, resents past losses, and rarely allows the present to be what it is. Fear is always of the future. Sadness is always of the past. And the present, the only moment when anything really happens, is often inhabited only partially, while the mind divides its attention between what was and what might be. But Spinoza speaks of another mode of existence, seeing things sub specie eternitatis, under the perspective of eternity. This Latin expression is often misinterpreted as meaning seeing things from a distant, cold, detached point of view, as if you were a cosmic observer looking down on human events with divine indifference. That is not it. Sub specie eternitatis means seeing each thing as a necessary expression of the infinite substance, not as an accident that could have been different, but as the only way it could be given everything that preceded it. It means seeing the present not as a point of passage between a past we have lost and a future we hope for, but as the only form that eternity has to exist. Eternity is not time that does not end. It is the absence of time. It is the immovable foundation upon which time happens, and each present moment, this one now, is a point of contact with that foundation, not metaphorically. In the structure of Spinoza's system, each particular event, seen as a necessary expression of the infinite substance, participates in the eternity of the substance. You, now reading this, breathing this air with this particular thought arising in this particular configuration of neurons, you are eternity happening in this form. Not later, not potentially. Now. What the two systems are saying about time converges at a single point of pressure. Suffering is largely a temporal issue, not in the sense that it passes with time. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. But in the sense that most human suffering is not in the present. It is in the story we build about the present. It is in the past we resent, and that can no longer be changed. It is in the future we fear, and that has not yet arrived, and may never arrive in the way we imagine. It is in the comparison between what is and what we think it should be. Buddha called this dukkha, and the usual translation as suffering is incomplete. Dukkha is more precisely the quality of dissatisfaction that permeates conditioned experience when it is interpreted through the filter of the ego that wants permanence in what is impermanent. Spinoza called this servitude, the condition of one who is dragged by reactive passions, by emotions that arise from inadequate knowledge, from seeing things partially without seeing the whole. And the two remedies point in the same direction, bringing attention back to what is, as it is, now. Not because the past doesn't matter, not because the future doesn't matter, but because the past and the future can only be processed, understood, integrated here, in this moment, with this mind that is available now. There is a beautiful paradox at the center of all this. The more completely you are in the present, the more you can honor the past and prepare the future. Because when you stop using the energy of the mind to resist what is, to fight against the past that cannot be changed, or to try to control the future that cannot be controlled, that energy becomes available for what can be done now, for the action that is possible, for the attention that is necessary, for the presence that those around you need from you. Siddhartha did not spend 45 years teaching because he had planned the future very well. He spent 45 years teaching because in every conversation he was completely present, with the beggar, with the king, with the disciple in crisis, with the hostile questioner. Each person who came to him received the totality of the attention that was to be given, not because he was a saint, because he had stopped dividing his attention between what was in front of him and what was in his head. Spinoza wrote, with lungs that were killing him, in health conditions that were visibly deteriorating, knowing he would not have much more time, with a clarity that has nothing urgent about it. Each proposition has the weight of something written by someone who is not in a hurry, because he understands that hurry is a fiction produced by fear. The work needed to be done. He was doing it. Not tomorrow. Not when conditions improved. Now. With what he had. This is not resignation. It is precisely the opposite. Resignation is saying, things are this way, I cannot change anything. I will passively accept. What Buddha and Spinoza describe is something else. Things are this way now, and now is the only place where anything can be done. So I do what I can do, with what I have, with total attention, without wasting energy fighting against what I cannot change. It is the most efficient way to act. It is the least anxious way to exist. It is, ultimately, the only honest way to be alive. Because life, the only one you will have in this particular configuration, with this particular story, is happening now. It was not. It will not be. It is. There is a conversation that most people never have. Not because it is forbidden, not because there are no words for it, but because there is a tacit agreement deeply rooted in contemporary culture that certain things are safer when not spoken aloud. Death is the main one. We talk about death as an abstract fact. We acknowledge that it will happen. We sign life insurance, make wills, sometimes even make peace with the idea in moments of vulnerability, illness, mourning, aging. But living with the question of death, allowing it to be present in daily life, not as a morbid obsession, but as a companion for reflection, is something that modernity has made almost impossible. Spinoza began his path from the other end. He wrote, in Proposition 67 of Book 4 of the Ethics, "A free man thinks of nothing less than death, and his wisdom is a meditation not of death but of life." This phrase is often read as if Spinoza were saying, ignore death, focus on life. But read it again carefully. He does not say do not think about death because it is scary. He says that the free man, the one guided by reason, who sees things sub specie aeternitatis, does not need to constantly think about death because his relationship with life already incorporates the understanding of impermanence. The fear of death is, for Spinoza, a symptom of servitude. It is the fear of losing the I. And if the I has already been correctly understood as a temporary mode of a substance that is eternal, the loss of that particular mode does not have the same poison that it has for someone who believes that the mode is all that exists. Buddha took the opposite path, not in the sense of outcome, but in the sense of method. Buddhism makes meditation on death a central practice. There is an exercise called maranasati, attention to death, in which the meditator deliberately contemplates the impermanence of the body, the process of decomposition, the fact that this life will end, and that the moment of termination is unknown. Not as an exercise in terror, as an exercise in clarity. The logic is this: most of human unnecessary suffering comes from acting as if one were immortal, from postponing what matters, from expending energy on conflicts that, from the perspective of a finite life, are absurdly trivial, from not saying what needs to be said to the people who need to hear it. When you truly internalize, not as an abstract idea, but as a visceral perception, that this life is finite, that this encounter may be the last, that this moment will not repeat itself, something changes in the quality of attention. The smaller things become smaller, the larger things become larger, the present becomes denser, more real, more habitable. This is not melancholy. It is not existential anxiety. It is what Tibetan Buddhists call bringing death as a counselor, not as a terrifying figure, but as the most honest perspective on what truly matters. But there is a real difference between the two systems regarding what happens after death. And this difference deserves to be explored honestly, without trying to erase the divergences to create artificial harmony. Buddhism, especially in its older forms, works with the doctrine of rebirth, samsara, the cycle of births and deaths. Not exactly reincarnation in the popular sense, an identical soul migrating from body to body, but a more subtle process, that the patterns of karma, the patterns of action and response that have been cultivated throughout a life, continue to produce effects beyond the death of the specific body. What is reborn is not a permanent self, because that self never existed as a permanent entity to begin with. What is reborn is the process, the pattern. Like a flame that lights another candle, it is not the same flame, but it is also not completely different. There is continuity without substantial identity, and nirvana, the ultimate goal of practice, is precisely the end of this cycle. It is the cessation of the process of conditioned rebirth. Not annihilation, but the extinction of the confusion that fuels the cycle. Spinoza does not work with rebirth. For him, the body is a finite mode of the infinite substance. When the mode dissolves, it dissolves. The specific configurations of memory, personality, particular history, all of this is the mode. And the mode ends. But, and here is the part that is often overlooked, there is something in us that is eternal. Spinoza states this explicitly. We feel and experience that we are eternal. Not the personality, not the memory, not psychological continuity. But the mind as it understands things sub specie aeternitatis, to the extent that it participates in the eternal order of reason, this mind participates in the eternity of substance. It is a different way of saying something similar to what Buddhism says through the concept of Buddha nature. The nature of awakening that is neither born nor dies because it was never a separate thing that could be born or die. What the two systems converge in saying about death is more significant than what they diverge on. First, The fear of death is proportional to the attachment to the illusion of a permanent ego. The less you need to be that specific self forever, the less terrifying the prospect of the end is. Second, the way to relate to death in a healthier manner is not to deny it or obsess over it, but to live with such completeness in the present that death is not an interruption of something unfinished, but the natural end of something that has been lived. Third, what you are at the most fundamental depth, consciousness happening, substance expressing itself, the universe experiencing this particular perspective. This is not the kind of thing that dies in the sense that the ego fears. The mode ends, the pattern dissolves, the configuration falls apart, but the substance continues. The ocean continues. Only this specific wave has completed its cycle. There is a story told about a Buddhist monk who was dying. His disciples gathered around him, anxious, waiting for last words of wisdom. The monk looked around, at the worried faces, at the hands holding his, at the tears in the eyes of those he had taught for decades, and he simply said, "I don't know." The disciples were shocked. This master, who had taught about death throughout his life, who had guided so many others through the process of dying, who had meditated on impermanence for decades, was saying he didn't know. And the monk continued, "I have never died before." There was something extraordinarily honest and extraordinarily liberating in that. There was no pretense of certainty where there was none. There was no doctrine replacing direct experience, just the honesty of someone who had practiced their whole life and knew how to distinguish between what had been verified through direct experience and what remained open. Spinoza would have approved, not uncertainty as weakness, but honesty about the limits of what can be verified. The refusal to build certainty on what cannot be demonstrated was precisely what he had practiced throughout his philosophical life. Saying "I don't know" is not failure. It is the beginning of any honest inquiry. And any honest inquiry about death, about what it is, about what ends, about what, if anything, continues, begins with the honesty of sitting with the question without rushing to the ready answer. Be it religious, scientific, or philosophical, there is a question that destroys faiths, ends friendships, and temporarily leaves philosophers mute. It is the oldest question in theology and moral philosophy. If there is a rational order in the universe, if there is a God, or an infinite substance, or a fundamental law that organizes everything that exists, why is there innocent suffering? Why do children born with diseases that consume them before they turn 5? Why do earthquakes bury entire neighborhoods while the inhabitants sleep? Why is genocide possible? Why does cruelty not only exist but thrive, often unpunished, often rewarded? This question has a technical name in philosophy, theodicy, the justification of God in the face of evil. And the answers that the Western tradition has produced over the centuries are, with few exceptions, variations of 3 major strategies. The first, evil is punishment. Innocent suffering does not really exist. You do not know the whole story. You do not see the whole picture. And if you did, you would understand that there was a moral reason for every pain. The second, evil is a test. Suffering is the instrument through which the soul is purified, character is forged, faith is deepened. The third, evil, is necessary. The existence of suffering is logically necessary for good to exist. There cannot be light without darkness. There cannot be virtue without temptation. There cannot be meaning without contrast. These 3 answers share a characteristic that makes them unsatisfactory for those who look with sufficient attention. They defend the order instead of examining suffering. They place the preservation of the theological narrative above the honesty about what the real experience of suffering is. Spinoza rejected all 3 answers, and his rejection was not from questioned faith, but from rigorous thought. If God and nature are the same thing, if the infinite substance is the totality of everything that exists, with no external, no other, no alternative, then God did not create the world with a purpose. He did not create it to be good. He did not create it with the intention that there would be more joy than suffering, more virtue than vice, more health than disease. The universe was not created for anything. It exists out of necessity of its own nature, and the things we call evil, disease, pain, cruelty, death, are not flaws in the plan. They are not accidents that should have been avoided. They are events that occur by the same necessity that governs everything else. A rock that falls and kills someone is not malicious. The virus that consumes a lung has no cruel intention. The human being who commits atrocities acts from causes, psychological, historical, biological, that are as necessary as any other event in the chain of causes and effects. This may sound like the coldest and most dehumanizing answer possible, but Spinoza does not stop there. What follows is what makes the system bearable, and not just bearable, but genuinely guiding. If evil is not punishment, if it is not a test, if it is not necessary for the existence of good, then what is it? Spinoza says, the evil is a perspective, not in the sense that suffering is not real. It is real for those who suffer, perfectly real, absolutely real. But in the sense that evil as an absolute category does not exist in nature. It exists only in relation to particular perspectives of particular beings. What is poison for one organism is nourishment for another. What is destruction for one system is reorganization for another. What we call catastrophe on the scale of a human life is imperceptible on the geological scale. This does not mean we should be indifferent to human suffering. It means precisely the opposite, that the work of reducing suffering is not the fulfillment of an external divine will. It is not obedience to an externally imposed commandment. It is the fullest expression of our own nature as beings who exist in relation to one another, helping not because God commands, but because we are the kind of being for whom the well-being of others and our own well-being are inseparable. Buddha approached the problem of evil differently, with an honesty that still surprises when read outside the context of religious reverence in which it usually appears. A king named Pasenadi went to Buddha with the version of the problem that was destroying his faith. He had a son who had died of illness before reaching adolescence. The king had done everything, offerings, rituals, prayers, and the son had died anyway. Pasenadi asked, if there is dharma, if there is a just order in the universe, how can this happen? Buddha did not answer that there was a hidden reason. He did not say that the son was being tested or purified. He did not say that the karma of a previous life had determined the fate. He said something much simpler and much harder. There is what is born. What is born is subject to disease. What is subject to disease is subject to death. This is not injustice. It is the nature of what exists conditionally. And suffering, the suffering of the Father, the suffering of any being who loses what they love, does not come from the fact of loss. Loss is inevitable. Extraordinary suffering comes from the resistance to inevitability, from the belief that this should not have happened, that there would be some way to be immortal if you did the right things. This belief, Buddha called it avidya, fundamental ignorance, is not moral weakness. It is not sin. It is simply not seeing things as they are. And seeing things as they are, accepting impermanence not as resigned defeat, but as real perception, does not eliminate the pain of loss. But it eliminates the additional suffering we build around the pain. The pain of loss is human. It is part of having loved. It is paradoxically one of the most direct forms of contact with what is real. The suffering of, this should not have happened, of, the universe has betrayed me, of, I will never be able to accept this. This is the suffering that practice can transform. The two systems, that of Spinoza and that of Buddha, converge in a response to the problem of evil that is radically different from the three traditional responses. It is not, evil has a reason that you cannot see. It is not, evil is necessary for good. It is, what you call evil is part of the structure of conditioned and impermanent existence, and your work is not to find a cosmic justification for it, but to learn to relate to it in a way that does not multiply suffering unnecessarily. This requires an honesty that most religious consolations refuse, because religious consolation says, it will be okay, and sometimes it is not. Sometimes children die. Sometimes evil prospers. Sometimes stories do not have redemptive endings. Buddha and Spinoza do not promise that it will be okay. They promise something different, that you can go through what is not okay without being destroyed by the going through. Not because you are strong enough, but because the part of you that can be destroyed. The ego that needs the universe to be just, that losses be deserved. That suffering has a logic that justifies it. That part is not what you fundamentally are, and what you fundamentally are cannot be destroyed by suffering, only transformed by it. In 1927, a young German physicist named Werner Heisenberg was in a hotel room in Copenhagen, unable to sleep, struggling with an equation that did not close. For weeks he and Niels Bohr had been trying to understand what quantum mechanics was saying about the nature of reality at the subatomic level, and what it was saying was disturbing to a degree that classical physics had not prepared anyone to face. The position and momentum of a particle could not be measured simultaneously with arbitrary precision, not because the instruments were imprecise, but because the particle, in the sense that having a defined position implies, simply did not have a defined position before it was measured. Reality, at some fundamental level, was not determined before observation. And Heisenberg, in that hotel room, thought of Spinoza, not as historical curiosity, as interlocutor, because what quantum mechanics was revealing, that the observer and the observed are not independent, that the act of measuring alters what is measured, that reality at the most fundamental level is probabilistic and relational rather than fixed and independent, was something that Spinoza's system had anticipated philosophically centuries before. Not the technical details, but the deep structure, that there is no observer separate from the observed, that the separation between subject and object is a useful abstraction and not an ultimate reality, that the universe is a unified system of which any observer is an inseparable part. Einstein had the same intuition when he formulated special relativity, that there is no absolute reference point from which the universe can be seen from the outside, that every measurement system is relative to an observer, that space and time are not the fixed stage upon which events happen, but relational properties of the fabric of events. 20th century physics did not confirm Spinoza's philosophy, but it created an intellectual world in which Spinoza's philosophy is more legible, closer to the experience of scientists trying to describe what they find when they look deeply into the structure of matter and the cosmos. Buddha's legacy has traversed different routes, but reached equally unexpected places. Contemporary neuroscience has, over the last 3 decades, been producing data about what happens in the brain during meditation that confirms, with a precision that would have astonished the monks who developed the practices, what the tradition had described in phenomenological language for 2,500 years. Jon Kabat-Zinn, a molecular biologist who had studied Buddhist meditation with Thich Nhat Hanh and with Korean Zen masters, created in the 70s a program called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, a hospital-based stress reduction program, in a hospital clinic in Massachusetts for patients with chronic pain for whom conventional medicine had exhausted treatment options. The results were consistent enough to force the scientific community to take mindfulness seriously. But what neuroimaging research revealed went beyond what Kabat-Zinn had expected. Regular meditation practice, not months or years of intensive monastic practice, but weeks of moderate and consistent practice, produces measurable changes in the physical structure of the brain. The prefrontal cortex, associated with emotional regulation and rational thinking, becomes thicker. The amygdala, associated with fear responses and stress response, becomes less reactive. The insula, associated with interoceptive perception, the awareness of the sensations of one's own body, becomes more active and more precise. In simple terms, the brain that meditates regularly is literally different, structurally different from the brain that does not meditate. And the direction of the changes corresponds exactly to what the tradition had described as the fruits of practice. Less automatic reactivity, more clarity of perception, greater capacity to be present, greater tolerance for uncertainty and discomfort. Richard Davidson, a neuroscientist at the University of Wisconsin, measured the brain activity of Tibetan monks with decades of practice, some with over 50,000 hours of accumulated meditation, and found patterns of activity in the left prefrontal cortex that were completely outside the normal parameters. Not in the sense of pathological abnormality, in the sense that the scale used to measure positive well-being states simply was not large enough to capture what was happening in those brains. But the most important legacy of the two systems is not in neuroscience laboratories or quantum physics debates. It is in the everyday lives of ordinary people. It is in the woman who lost her mother to a degenerative disease and found in Stoic philosophy, which is a direct cousin of Spinoza, a way to traverse grief without being consumed by it. It is in the man who reached 40 with a successful career, a beautiful apartment, and a persistent feeling that he had lost something fundamental without knowing when, who accidentally read a book on Buddhism and recognized on the first page the exact description of what he had felt his whole life without being able to name it. It is in the therapist who uses mindfulness practices not as a relaxation technique, but as an investigative tool to help her clients see the habitual patterns of their own minds with enough clarity for the pattern to lose some of the automatic strength it has when it is invisible. It is in the scientist who, after a lifetime building models of the universe that increasingly reveal the interdependence of everything with everything, reads the phrase from Spinoza, God or nature, and feels something that is not exactly religious emotion, but is undeniably reverence. What both systems offer to the 21st century is something that modernity, with all its technology and material abundance and speed of information, has failed to produce: a way of being present. Not as a productivity technique, not as a performance optimization method, not as a well-being strategy to increase efficiency, but as a genuine response to the human condition, to impermanence, to uncertainty, to the inevitability of loss, to the depth of love that is only possible when you stop protecting the ego from everything that could threaten it. The 21st century has produced more information than all previous centuries combined, and more anxiety, more technological connection, and more loneliness, more options and less clarity about what really matters. Buddha and Spinoza do not have answers to the specific problems of the 21st century: climate change, artificial intelligence, a crisis of meaning in a secular culture, without satisfactory substitutes for the cohesion that religion provided. But they have something more fundamental than specific answers. They have a posture, a way of relating to uncertainty that is neither denial nor panic, a way of being present in what is difficult without being destroyed by the difficult, a way of acting effectively without needing the outcome to guarantee inner peace in advance, a way of loving people, ideas, life, without turning that love into a chain that binds both the lover and the beloved. And perhaps the most radical of all, a way of being oneself, completely honestly, without excuse and without inflation, that does not depend on anyone's approval to sustain itself. Spinoza was excommunicated. He lived alone. He died young. He was banned for centuries, and he never backed down from a comma of what he had understood, not out of stubbornness, not out of pride, because the truth, when you see it, does not need your defense to continue being true. It only needs you to keep looking at it, with honesty, with courage, without blinking. We have reached the end, not the end of the subject. The subject has no end, because it is the question of what it means to be human, and this question does not close as long as there are humans asking questions. But we have reached the end of this specific journey, with these two men on these two paths, to this single point of arrival that is simultaneously the starting point of everything. And before finishing, I need to be honest about something. There is a comfortable version of this story, the version in which you hear about Buddha and Spinoza, are impressed by the convergence. Think, how interesting that two such different systems arrived at the same conclusion. Perhaps research a little more, perhaps buy a book that will sit on the bedside table for months without being read, and then go on living exactly as you were before. That would not be a waste. Any contact with these ideas, however superficial, leaves something. A seed. The question that will appear again at an unexpected moment. A night of insomnia. A period of grief. A moment of unexpected clarity in the midst of the everyday. But there is another version. The version in which you take seriously what has been said here. Not as a new belief to be adopted, not as an intellectual identity to be displayed, but as an invitation to a different way of existing, more honest, more present, less spent on protecting comfortable fictions about who you are and what the world owes you. This second version is harder and more alive. I will say what I believe, not as doctrine, not as a recipe. That the two systems together are asking. They are asking you to stop. Not permanently, not dramatically. Not that you abandon everything and go to a forest like Siddhartha, or to an isolated room like Spinoza, but that you stop regularly. That you create, in the structure of your life, moments in which doing is interrupted by being, in which thinking about life is replaced, even if briefly, by simply living. That you feel, breathe, observe what is happening in the mind without immediately reacting, classifying, narrating. This is the Buddhist request. Spinoza's request is adjacent, that you think, not the distracted and fragmented thinking of digital everyday life, but the deliberate, honest thinking that asks, what am I really assuming here? What belief is producing this emotion? If I saw this situation as a necessary expression of causes I did not control, what would change in my relationship with it? One system asks for silence, the other asks for clarity. Both want the same thing, that you stop living life from the outside. There is something Buddha said near the end of his life that has stayed with me throughout this narrative. He was sick. He knew he would die soon. The disciples were around, anxious, wanting final instructions, wanting him to name a successor, wanting the security of a system that would continue managing the teaching after he was gone. And Buddha said, "Do not make me a refuge. Make yourselves a refuge," not in the way these words are often quoted, as a declaration of intellectual independence, as cool anti-dogmatism, but in the deeply practical sense, the refuge you are looking for outside, in authority, in tradition, in approval, in the right circumstances, in the right partner, in the right job, in the right life. That refuge does not exist out there. It exists here, in the clarity of perception, in the honesty of the gaze, in the ability to be with what is, even when what is not what you wanted. That is the refuge. And it is available now, regardless of any circumstance. Spinoza wrote on the last page of the Ethics, in a phrase that seems almost disarmingly simple in light of everything that preceded it. If the path I have shown to lead to this seems very difficult, it can, however, be found. And it certainly must be difficult since it is found so rarely. For if salvation were within immediate reach, and could be found without great effort, how could it be neglected by almost everyone? But all excellent things are as difficult as they are rare. There is an honesty in this phrase that is almost moving. After 340 propositions constructed with the precision of a geometer, after one of the most rigorous philosophical works that Western history has produced, after all the demonstration, he simply says it is difficult. It is found rarely, but it can be found. It is not beyond your capabilities. It is beyond your habits. And habits, unlike capabilities, can change. What is terrifying about the truth that both discovered is not the abyss. The abyss is terrifying only while you are trying not to fall. When you stop trying not to fall, when you accept that the ground you were protecting was built of fiction, the abyss ceases to be an abyss. It becomes space, and space is not a threat. Space is what allows anything to be what it is. The space between words is what makes reading possible. The silence between notes is what makes music possible. And the space that exists when you stop filling every moment with the narrative of the ego, with I want, I fear, I deserve, I lose, that space is where life finally can happen. Not the life you planned, not the life you deserve, not the life that circumstances should have guaranteed. The life that is here, that has always been here, that is the only life that has ever existed. Two men, one born at the foot of the Himalayas, in a palace of sandalwood and jasmine, the other in an alley in Amsterdam, the son of refugees, surrounded by old spices and rolls of Torah. One who abandoned a throne to sit under a fig tree, the other who was expelled from everything that was his identity and chose to polish glass and write geometry. Two paths, completely different. A truth, the same, and this truth is not their property, it never was. It is the truth of who you are when you stop pretending to be something else. It was here before you read the first line. It will be here after you close this and go back to your life. The only question that really matters, that the two men spent their lives trying to formulate with enough clarity to reach here, is this: will you continue living as if you didn't know? Or will you do something with what you know? The answer is not in this story. It never was. It is where it has always been, here, in you, now.